At the center of this tragic story were two sisters, Jessica and Cassandra Lawrence, whose lives had been intertwined in a complex web of love, rivalry, and resentment since childhood. Cassandra, the older of the two, had always been the golden child. Beautiful, educated, and married to the charming and successful architect Dominic Blunt. Their union was the envy of Millhaven, a seemingly perfect marriage everyone wanted to emulate. Jessica and Cassandra were born into a family of modest means. Their father was a local fisherman, and their mother a teacher. From a young age, it was clear the two sisters were as different as night and day. Cassandra, with her gentle nature, was the pride of her parents. She was an excellent student, loved by her teachers, and seemed to navigate the social waters of Millhaven with effortless grace. Her life path seemed predetermined. She would go to college, find a respectable job, and settle down with a good man to start a family of her own. Jessica, on the other hand, was a force of nature from the moment she could walk. She possessed a wild spirit that both fascinated and unsettled those around her. Although Jessica was as intelligent as her sister, her academic achievements were overshadowed by her rebellious nature and her penchant for pushing boundaries. As they grew older, the differences between the sisters only became more pronounced. Cassandra pursued a degree in education, following in her mother's footsteps, while Jessica flitted between various majors, never quite finding her place. During this time, Jessica's manipulative tendencies began to surface. She charmed her way out of trouble, using her wit and allure to turn situations to her advantage. Jessica's relationships were always intense, but short-lived. She seemed to thrive in the chaos of new romances, only to grow bored once the initial excitement faded. This pattern left a trail of broken hearts and embittered ex-partners, further cementing her reputation as the black sheep of Millhaven. Cassandra returned to her hometown after college and quickly caught the attention of Dominic Blunt, a rising star in the world of architecture. Dominic had come to Millhaven to oversee the restoration of the town's historic lighthouse, but was captivated by the gentle beauty of the town, both its landscape and Cassandra herself. Their courtship was swift and passionate, culminating in a fairy tale wedding that was the talk of the town for months. Dominic's career continued to flourish, and soon he and Cassandra were living in a beautiful house overlooking the ocean, their life together seeming like a modern fairy tale. Yet beneath the surface of their perfect marriage, cracks began to form. Cassandra, always the dutiful daughter and wife, yearned for something more. She had given up her own dreams of travel and adventure to settle in Millhaven, and part of her resented the sacrifices she had made for her marriage. Dominic, for his part, struggled with his own demons. The pressures of his career and the expectations of small-town life weighed heavily on him. He loved Cassandra deeply, but there were moments when he felt suffocated by the perfection they were supposed to maintain. Into this delicate balance, Jessica re-entered their lives. After years of drifting from city to city, she returned to Millhaven, claiming she wanted to reconnect with her roots. In reality, she was fleeing another failed relationship and mounting debts, seeking refuge in the one place she knew would take her in. Cassandra, ever the loving sister, welcomed Jessica with open arms, offering her a place to stay until she got back on her feet. But as Jessica settled into life at the Blunt household, the dynamics among the three began to shift in subtle yet profound ways. The stage was set for a drama that would shake Millhaven to its core and forever alter the lives of all involved. Initially, her presence seemed to breathe new life into Cassandra and Dominic's relationship. Evenings were filled with laughter and reminiscing as the sisters caught up on lost time, with Dominic playing the role of attentive husband and brother-in-law. But as days turned into weeks, Jessica's true intentions came to light. Her eyes lingered a moment too long on Dominic. Her casual touches grew more frequent and deliberate. She found excuses to be alone with him, asking for help with her car, seeking advice on job applications, or simply catching him late at night in the kitchen when Cassandra had already gone to bed. Dominic, at first oblivious to Jessica's advances, found himself increasingly drawn to her vibrant personality. While Cassandra was reliable and predictable, Jessica was spontaneous and exciting. She listened to his architectural plans with rapt attention, asking insightful questions that made him feel truly understood. In these moments, Dominic felt a spark he hadn't experienced in years. Dominic was a man of principles, devoted to his wife and the life they had built together. He tried to distance himself from Jessica, finding excuses to spend more time at the office or taking on extra projects that kept him away from home. Jessica, however, was not easily deterred. She saw the internal struggle in Dominic's eyes and viewed it as a challenge rather than a deterrent. She began weaving a careful web of seduction, playing on his insecurities and unfulfilled desires. One evening, while Cassandra attended a school board meeting, Jessica arranged a seemingly innocent dinner with Dominic. She cooked his favorite meal, opened a bottle of expensive wine, and created an atmosphere of intimacy that was hard to resist. As they talked late into the night, Jessica carefully steered the conversation toward Dominic's passions and dreams, areas where Cassandra, she knew, had never truly connected with him. Dominic felt a flood of emotions: flattery, desire, and overwhelming guilt. He stumbled over his words, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground, but Jessica had already sensed her advantage. She leaned closer, her hand brushing his. "Don't you ever wonder what it would be like to be truly understood, to be with someone who sees you for who you really are?" The tension in the room was palpable. Dominic knew he should leave, that he should end this dangerous game before it went too far, but something held him in place, caught in the gravitational pull of Jessica's allure. When Jessica's lips met his in a passionate kiss, Dominic's resistance crumbled. In that moment, the foundation of his marriage began to crack, setting off a chain of events that would lead to an unimaginable tragedy. The weeks following that fateful night were a haze of stolen moments and growing guilt for Dominic. What had started as a brief lapse in judgment quickly developed into a full-blown affair, with Jessica and Dominic finding ever more creative ways to be together without arousing Cassandra's suspicion. Their rendezvous ranged from hurried encounters in Dominic's office to carefully planned business trips that allowed them to escape the watchful eyes of Millhaven. Jessica reveled in the thrill of their forbidden romance, each secret meeting amplifying her sense of triumph over her sister. For Dominic, the affair was an intoxicating mix of excitement and self-loathing, each encounter leaving him both elated and tormented by guilt. Jessica, the master manipulator, knew exactly how to keep Dominic ensnared. She played the role of the perfect mistress, alternating between passionate seductress and vulnerable confidant. She listened to his frustrations about work and his unfulfilled ambitions, offering him the understanding and validation he craved. "I've never met anyone like you, Dominic," she whispered in their intimate moments. "You deserve so much more than this small town can offer you." Her words were carefully chosen, planting seeds of dissatisfaction with his life with Cassandra in Dominic's mind. She painted vivid pictures of the future they could have together, a life full of excitement and passion, free from the constraints of small-town expectations. Dominic was increasingly torn between his growing feelings for Jessica and his loyalty to Cassandra. The double life he was leading began to take its toll, manifesting in mood swings and uncharacteristic behavior that did not go unnoticed by his wife. At home, Dominic's guilt manifested in a mix of emotional distance and overcompensation. There were days when he could barely look Cassandra in the eye, and others when he showered her with affection out of remorse. He threw himself into his work, taking on more projects than ever, using his career both as an escape and an excuse for his frequent absences. Jessica, for her part, played the role of the doting sister-in-law perfectly. She engaged Cassandra in long conversations, feigning interest in her day-to-day life while secretly reveling in her deception. There were moments when a flicker of guilt crossed Jessica's face, a brief acknowledgement of the pain she was causing her sister, but these moments were quickly suppressed, overshadowed by her desire for Dominic and her deep-seated need to finally eclipse Cassandra. As the affair progressed, the risks they took grew greater. They began meeting in more public places, their desire for each other stronger than their caution. There were near misses. A neighbor almost caught them embracing. A colleague of Cassandra's spotted them dining together in a neighboring town. Each close call only heightened the intensity of their relationship, the danger becoming part of the allure. Yet, as weeks turned into months, the strain of their deception began to show. Dominic, once invigorated by the affair, was now constantly on edge. The guilt gnawed at him, affecting his work and his relationships with friends and family. He began to question whether the passion he felt for Jessica was worth the destruction of the life he had built with Cassandra. Jessica sensed Dominic's internal struggle and doubled her efforts to keep him with her. She demanded more and more of his time, pushing for declarations of love. Her manipulations became more blatant, playing on both his guilt and his desires. As their affair reached its peak, neither Jessica nor Dominic realized that their carefully constructed house of cards was on the verge of collapsing. The truth, as it often does, began to surface quietly, ready to shake the lives of everyone involved. While Jessica and Dominic were lost in their passionate affair, Cassandra slowly began to piece together a puzzle she never wanted to solve. At first, the changes were subtle. A lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on Dominic's clothes, hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended when she entered the room, and an emotional distance that seemed to grow with each passing day. Ever the optimist, Cassandra initially attributed these changes to work stress or a midlife crisis. She tried to bridge the growing gap between them by planning romantic dinners and weekend getaways, only to be met with half-hearted enthusiasm from Dominic. Ironically, during this time, her sister Jessica became her confidant, offering sympathetic ears and assurances that only drove the knife of betrayal deeper. But as weeks turned into months, Cassandra could no longer ignore the nagging voice in the back of her mind. She began paying closer attention to the inconsistencies in Dominic's stories about late nights at the office and out-of-town meetings. She noticed the way Jessica's eyes followed Dominic around the room, the barely concealed hunger in her gaze. One afternoon, while doing laundry, Cassandra found a matchbook from a hotel in a neighboring town in Dominic's jacket pocket, a hotel she knew was nowhere near his usual business locales. The discovery sent a cold shiver down her spine, as the physical evidence made it impossible to deny her worst suspicions any longer. Torn between confronting her suspicions and fearing what she might uncover, Cassandra found herself in a constant state of anxiety. She began to withdraw from friends and colleagues, unable to bear the thought of voicing her suspicions and making them real. Her sleep was plagued by nightmares, and she watched Dominic and Jessica like a hawk, searching for signs that would confirm or deny her fears. In a moment of desperation, Cassandra even considered hiring a private investigator, but the thought of strangers poking around in her private life was too much for her. Instead, she resolved to confront Dominic and Jessica individually, hoping that one of them would crack under the pressure and reveal the truth. Cassandra had no idea that her decision to seek the truth would set off a chain of events leading to a confrontation more devastating than she could have ever imagined, one that would change the course of all their lives forever. The day of reckoning came on a stormy afternoon in late autumn. Cassandra had spent the morning preparing for this moment, rehearsing what she would say, how she would remain calm and collected in the face of potential heartbreak. When Dominic walked through the door, shaking the rain from his coat, he saw his wife standing in the living room, her face a mask of barely contained emotion. The tension in the air was palpable, and he knew immediately that their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. "We need to talk," she began, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts. "I know about you and Jessica." The color drained from Dominic's face, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled for words. In that moment of stunned silence, Cassandra saw the truth written plainly on his face, and her last glimmer of hope vanished. "How long?" she demanded, her voice rising. "How long have you been sleeping with my sister?" Dominic's shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew there was no point in denying it any longer. "Cassandra, I'm so sorry. It just happened." Cassandra cut him off with a bitter laugh. "You didn't mean for it to? What, did you trip and fall into her bed? How could you do this?" The floodgates opened, and months of pent-up suspicion and pain poured out. Cassandra hurled accusations and questions at Dominic, her voice echoing through the house. Dominic, for his part, could only stand there and endure her wrath, offering feeble apologies that did nothing to stem her anger. As their argument reached its crescendo, the front door opened, and Jessica walked in, only to freeze in place as she took in the scene before her. For a moment, the three of them stood frozen, a tableau of betrayal and guilt. "Jessica, how nice of you to join us," Cassandra said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "We were just discussing your affair with my husband." Jessica's eyes darted between Cassandra and Dominic, desperately searching for a way out of the situation. Dominic, torn between the two sisters, tried to intervene. "Please, let's just calm down and talk about this rationally." His words only redirected Cassandra's fury. In a fit of rage, Cassandra grabbed a vase from the coffee table and hurled it across the room, narrowly missing Dominic's head. It shattered against the wall, punctuating her words. The sound seemed to snap Jessica out of her defiant stance. For the first time, a flicker of remorse crossed her face. Dominic and Jessica exchanged a look of helpless guilt before slowly retreating toward the door. As it closed behind them, Cassandra collapsed onto the sofa, her body racked with sobs. The life she had known, the future she had planned, all of it had crumbled to dust within minutes. As the storm raged outside, Cassandra's mind was a maelstrom of emotions: anger, shame, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. In that moment, she made a decision that would set in motion the final tragic act of this sordid drama. The bartender, a grizzled man named Hank, watched with growing concern as Cassandra downed drink after drink. He had seen many patrons drown their sorrows, but something about Cassandra's wild-eyed look made him uneasy. "Another," Cassandra demanded, her words slightly slurred. Hank hesitated, but the steel in her gaze made him think twice. He poured her another straight whiskey, silently vowing it would be her last. As the evening wore on, the bar emptied out, leaving Cassandra alone with her thoughts and her drinks. The alcohol dulled the sharp edges of her pain, replacing them with a bitter resolve. Near midnight, Hank gently suggested it was time for her to head home. "Can I call you a cab, miss?" Cassandra waved him off, fumbling in her purse for her car keys. "I'm fine," she insisted. "I just need to get out of here." Hank reached out to stop her, but Cassandra was already stumbling toward the door. As she staggered to the parking lot, Cassandra managed to start her car. The engine roared to life in the stillness of the night. She pulled out of the lot, her vision blurred and her reactions dangerously slow. The winding coastal road stretched out before her, a ribbon of asphalt barely visible in the moonlight. As she drove, Cassandra's mind was a chaotic whirl of emotions: anger at Dominic and Jessica's betrayal, shame for not seeing the signs sooner, fear of the uncertain future now laid before her. The speedometer climbed higher as she pressed down on the gas pedal. In one particularly treacherous curve, disaster struck. Cassandra's dulled reflexes failed her, and she took the turn too fast. She felt the car begin to skid, the tires squealing on the asphalt. In a moment of terrifying clarity, she realized her mistake, but it was too late. The guardrail gave way with a sickening crunch of metal, and suddenly Cassandra was airborne. Then there was darkness as the car plummeted over the cliff's edge, hurtling toward the jagged rocks below. The first rays of dawn were just breaking over the horizon when Officer Liam Murphy received the call. A jogger had discovered a wrecked car at the base of the Whispering Cliffs, a notorious stretch of coastline. Murphy, a veteran of Mill Haven's small police force, felt a sense of dread as he made his way to the accident scene. The sight that greeted him was gruesome. The car, a silver sedan, was barely recognizable, crushed by the impact and battered by the waves. As the rescue team worked to extract the vehicle from its precarious position, Murphy began the grim task of piecing together what had happened. The license plate, miraculously still intact, quickly identified the car as belonging to Cassandra Blunt. Murphy's heart sank. He knew Cassandra, like most people in Millhaven. The thought of delivering this news to her family weighed heavily on him. As the morning wore on and the full extent of the tragedy became clear, rumors began to swirl through the town. Cassandra Blunt had died in an apparent drunk driving accident. It seemed impossible, completely out of character for the woman everyone knew as responsible and level-headed. Detective Sarah Watson, called in from the nearest city to lead the investigation, suspected there was more to the story. Her keen eye noticed details that didn't quite add up. The absence of skid marks on the road, suggesting she hadn't braked, the odd angle at which the car had gone off the cliff, the fact that Cassandra had been drinking alone, something her friends swore she never did. When Watson arrived at the Blunt household to deliver the news, she was surprised by the palpable tension in the air. Dominic Blunt's reaction to his wife's death seemed strangely muted, tinged with guilt, and the presence of Jessica Lawrence, Cassandra's sister, in the house at such an early hour immediately set off alarm bells. In the days following Cassandra's death, Detective Watson delved deeper into the investigation, peeling back layers of Millhaven's seemingly idyllic surface to reveal the chaos beneath. Her first step was to retrace Cassandra's final hours, a task that led her to the Rusty Anchor and its reluctant bartender, Hank. Hank's account of Cassandra's state on the night of her death painted a picture of a woman in deep emotional distress. She was knocking them back like there was no tomorrow, he told Watson, guilt etched on his weathered face. I tried to stop her from driving. This statement starkly contrasted with everything Watson had heard from Cassandra's friends and colleagues. The woman they described was cautious and responsible, not someone who drank excessively and then got behind the wheel. The detective's suspicions deepened. Watson's next focus was on Dominic Blunt and Jessica Lawrence. Their behavior since Cassandra's death had been, to say the least, odd. Instead of grieving separately, they seemed to lean on each other, their interactions marked by meaningful looks and hushed conversations that abruptly ceased when others approached. A breakthrough came when Watson interviewed Cassandra's closest friend, Olivia Chen. At first, Olivia was hesitant to speak ill of the dead or add to the family's pain. But when Watson gently pressed, the floodgates opened. Cassandra confided in me just days before it happened, Olivia admitted, her voice trembling. She suspected Dominic was having an affair with Jessica. This revelation cast the entire case in a new light. Watson immediately sought to confirm this information by delving deeper into Dominic and Jessica's recent activities. Bank records revealed suspicious transactions, hotel bookings, expensive gifts that coincided with times Dominic claimed to be on business trips. As the evidence mounted, Watson brought Dominic and Jessica in for separate interrogations. Under the detectives' relentless questioning, their carefully constructed alibis began to crumble. Jessica was the first to break. Yes, we were having an affair, she confessed, tears streaming down her face. Cassandra found out that night. We had a huge fight, all three of us. But I swear, we didn't know she'd left the house after we did. Confronted with Jessica's confession, Dominic eventually admitted to the affair but vehemently denied any involvement in Cassandra's death. We made a terrible mistake, he said, his voice hollow with regret. But I loved Cassandra. I never wanted this. Watson believed they were telling the truth about not being directly responsible for Cassandra's death, but she knew their actions had set the tragic events in motion. The detective's report painted a clear picture. Cassandra, distraught after discovering her husband's infidelity with her own sister, had sought solace in alcohol. Her decision to drive in that state was ultimately her own, but it was the direct result of the emotional trauma caused by Dominic and Jessica's betrayal. In the end, no charges were filed in connection with Cassandra's death, but in the court of public opinion, Dominic and Jessica were already condemned. The truth about their affair spread like wildfire through Millhaven, forever tarnishing their reputations and ensuring that Cassandra's death would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Over time, the raw pain of the events faded, but their impact on Millhaven remained. The town eventually regained its outward appearance of tranquility, but its residents knew that beneath the calm surface of small-town life, passions and secrets could brew with deadly force. The tragedy of Cassandra Blunt had forever altered the soul of Millhaven, leaving indelible marks on all who called it home.